Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll receive insight, inspiration, and advice for aligning your mind, body, and spirit to achieve a fulfilled life and live your purpose with me, your host, Jennifer Longmore. You'll also hear from other leaders who share their inspirational stories and wisdom in living fulfilled, on purpose, and making an impact. If you're a mission-driven leader and you're passionate about learning and integrating all the things that empower you to live and lead a fulfilled, purpose-led life, this is the show for you. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to actually welcome back as a guest to the show today, Jennifer Longmore. She's the founder of the #1 Akashic Record training school in the world, and she's built a thriving business all around things consciousness. She's also a serial entrepreneur, investor, and board advisor to various conscious apps as she prepares them to trade publicly. And when she's not coaching thousands of conscious entrepreneurs to create 6- and 7-figure businesses doing what they love, you can find her hiking with her family, mining for crystals with her son, or enjoying martial arts with her husband. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm totally excited to have you back and to have this conversation today. And, you know, when I was reading your bio and I was saying, thriving business around all things consciousness, I was thinking to myself, that's especially in this last year and a half been right up your alley, right? Because as a collective, we're experiencing such a significant, wake up call, for lack of a better way to put it. That's something that I'm, personally very passionate about, is helping people to align, in their mind, body, and spirit to achieve fulfillment, something that has not been part of the, I guess I could say, patriarchal society we've had set up thus far. So I could go down a rabbit hole on that. But one thing I did want to actually get your thoughts on, one of the things that I'm also passionate about is, bridging the gap that still exists today between our spirituality and our values, and the fact that that's really the essence of who we are. But it's still largely absent from the landscape of the workplace and, the business world. What are your thoughts on continuing to narrow that gap? Because I see increased awareness today, but we have a lot further to go.
Wow, that's a big one. I used to work in corporate, and there's a lot of these conversations happening, but they happen in the lunchroom, they happen in the bathroom, They happen at so-and-so's going away party, or whatever the things are. So there's a lot of soul in corporate, and corporate makes up a big chunk of the world, right? There's a lot of beings that work in corporate. And so we just don't hear about it as much because, the workplace really just wants to stay focused on making widgets or selling digital this or that, like whatever the thing is that the corporation is up to. But there is soul in corporate. There's definitely an increase in soulful based support in corporate, especially over the last year and a bit, because rightly so, there's no playbook for this. So people don't know how to lead people during these times. They're doing their best. They really are. None of us really know, other than each day we have to put one foot before the other. There's definitely more of a call into corporate because people are having an existential crisis personally. Because when you have your restrictions limit, or when you have your freedoms restricted, regardless of what people's belief is about whether this is real or whether there's some other agenda, it doesn't matter. From a human perspective, on a psychological level, and a spiritual level, people are having an existential crisis. So they don't even know if they want these jobs. They're like, do I really want to still be in a cubicle? Do I really want to be on 17 Zoom calls a week? Do I want to be, there's all kinds of things people are having. And then on top of that, most people aren't used to leading teams virtually for this long and through this, because really what happened last year, regardless of whether people thought this was a good thing or a bad thing in the beginning, right? When we thought it was just 2 weeks to stay at home and flatten the curve, Some people were loving it. They're like, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. I'm going to get my house all fit. Some people really actually went to town, right? And they're like, I'm going to use this time to better myself. And other people were like, oh my God, and again, rightly so, whatever our filter is. But we still had trauma coming into 2020. We had personal trauma that just was there, stuff we didn't know was there, stuff we thought we had dealt with. And then a lot of people experience trauma. And what happens is when you compound trauma, when you have a trauma brick and then you put another trauma brick on it and you just keep layering it, it becomes overwhelming. It becomes a burden if people feel like they're carrying these bricks on their back. And so you and I might look at someone and go, why are they taking such and such so personally? It's just a crack in the sidewalk. They just, they barely tripped. Why are they having a full-on meltdown? Well, it's the trauma. The weight of the trauma is really getting to people. And most people are unconscious of the trauma they were bringing in. They were unconscious to the magnitude of the trauma of losing your future, maybe realizing the world isn't what you thought it was. Maybe all of a sudden you're having to face your own existence differently. There was a lot of things coming at people. And then, of course, you mix in identity politics, you mix in all kinds of other things. People were losing relationships. And additionally, not everyone is safe at home. In fact, there's a lot of people who were already unsafe at home that are increasingly unsafe. And then on top of that, maybe people felt safe in relationships, but because of the key ingredients right now, it was just the right concoction to create a bottle and blow situation at home. There's a lot of experiences right now. And then on top of that, we look at what's going on in the world. We have the BLM movement, and there's questions around that because from an ideological perspective, it's a great thing, but some people question the motives of who's running it and maybe what does it really stand for and what does this money go to? We don't always know. We've got the situation right now in Canada with the First Nations community and residential schools. And the reason I bring this stuff up is because the more trauma we have, the harder it is to deal with that stuff out in the world because we only have so much bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I used to work in forensics and I had to investigate thousands of cases a year of sexual abuse and ritualistic abuse. And I had to dissect cults, and I had a lot of people in powerful positions that I had to take to court and present evidence about how much of a poop head they were, right? I only had so much bandwidth. Eventually what happens is compassion fatigue sets in. And if any nurses are watching this, or doctors, or 911 operators, ambulance attendants, anyone that's in a crisis-oriented job, maybe you're an outpatient mental health person or inpatient, all kinds of careers that require an immense amount of bandwidth to hold for people. When you have trauma and when you're also having vicarious trauma, there's only so much bandwidth before compassion fatigue sets in. If we want to heal this world, and not allow residential schools to even exist, and not allow or hopefully wiping out BLM simply because it's no longer an issue, right? In a good way, I mean that we no longer need movements like BLM and similar things, and we don't have 4,000 missiles a day being shot at people in Israel and all the things that are going on in the world. Our heart shuts down with its compassion fatigue because that's how we cope. That's literally an internal coping mechanism. But if we want to heal the planet, and if we want to ascend to where we're going planetarily, we're going to have to deal with our internal trauma so that we have the bandwidth to really advocate and be activists for the things that truly matter. Because ultimately, at the core of who we all are, I believe we all want for the betterment of humanity. We just don't know how to do it, and we don't have the emotional bandwidth at this moment to deal with that.
Absolutely. I really feel that and resonate with that. And I also feel like, a lot of the people, and hopefully some of them listening, that feel like they've been intensely experiencing, traumas that they weren't aware that were there, that are rising up. I believe there's a reason for that. And as you said, it has to come up to be cleared in order for others to be able to serve at a higher level. And I believe that that's why that's happening with certain people right now. As we're shifting as a collective, people are, I don't, for lack of a better way to put it, they're like waking up or being turned on. You know, it's like their time for being here, their time to step forward, to make their contribution to the planet known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll say for me, you know, like there's a lot of people that'll come to me, and they were already coming to me in 2019 and onwards saying, I'm thinking of having a business, or I have a business, but I run it more like a hobby. And okay, fine. But then they're still saying this to me after the pandemic. And I'm like, if a pandemic isn't enough to light a flame under your butt to go and actually help some people and stop making it about you and personalizing everything, right? Because anytime we're like, oh, I'm too much, or I'm not enough, or that's all about us. That's not a service-based business. You can't serve people when you're focusing on you. It's not about you. It doesn't mean you get lost in the mix. Of course you tend to yourself, and of course you can do what lights you up. But all of that stuff of I'm too much, I'm not enough, I'm a fraud, I'm whatever, that's directing it inwards. And clients can't hire us because they feel that the energy is coming inwards instead of going out to try and serve. It doesn't mean we can't have those thoughts, right? But we want to mitigate that. Anyways, I don't really have the bandwidth for people that aren't all in at this point. Like, this is what we came here for. If last year didn't wake people up to the fact that, oh, because anyone that's in my circle is like, oh, now I'm really clear. I'd kind of wondered, I knew my purpose, but this is now giving me a reason to really thrive.
Yeah.
Because now I really realize why I'm here, and this kind of stuff doesn't land well with me, and I'm going to go make a difference in the world. I needed this to go and make a difference. If people aren't there yet, I get it, because there might still be some trauma to release, but sitting on the sidelines or waiting for other people to come and lead, like we all have to rise up and lead ourselves at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Lead together.
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed a dynamic over this last year, especially where a lot of people that were very visible in the online space as leaders, right, just kind of like disappeared. And then the other, which was sort of on the opposite side of the fence, which is where I was, which is that I felt more of a sense of conviction than ever. It's like, okay, I thought I knew what I needed to do before, and now I feel like I need to turn it up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That was my thing last year. And you'll know, because we were connected last year. Well, we've been connected for a long time. Something came over me, and I actually remember doing a Facebook Live saying, you know, there was a lot of people that were happy to take your money, claiming they were a leader, and they were happy to lead you through the fluffy times. And here's my Mercedes, and here's my mansion, and here's all these things. Now, when things are tough, they literally disappeared. They were not leading their communities at all. They contracted. Now, I get that they were likely having some trauma. I don't know. They were potentially ill-equipped to deal with this, because maybe they weren't really leaders, right? Because I don't know how to lead through this.
It's true.
I just know how to lead myself. I literally don't. None of us have a manual for this. But what I do have is self-awareness. What I do have is the capacity to lead myself. So I figure, okay, well, if I just keep leading myself through this and being a model, then maybe that'll help some people. Maybe I can help encourage people and extract their zone of genius from them so they can really be anchored in that. And now I'm just aligning with people that speak the same language, essentially. You know, I'm not here to wake anyone up, because I know that people are going to wake themselves up to whatever they need to wake themselves up to when they will, right? No amount of us jumping on the bed and screaming, wake up, wake up. I know a lot of people felt that way last year, right?
Yeah.
And no amount of me judging people, no amount of me screaming or calling people a sheep, which I never have. I just never have. I don't think that's appropriate. But a lot of people do, as you know. And like, none of that is going to inspire people to wake up. If anything, it's going to cause their stubborn sense of needing to protect themselves and needing to be right to dig their heels in deeper.
Yeah.
And so I just trust that, just as I did, I woke up when I woke that, whenever that was, whenever that light bulb went off, where I was like, oh, here's a different perspective of the world we're living in. That will happen for the people that it's meant to happen to. And there's some people who are just not meant to, because they're not here for that reason. Some of us are here to be activators, awakeners, disruptors, catalysts, etc. People like you and I, and potentially those of you that are listening right now. I'm guessing you are, because you wouldn't be vibrationally connected here if you didn't feel that. And other people just aren't. They were here, they were already meant to exit at some point. They're only here to receive what they came here to receive for their own soul growth, and then they're going to exit when they exit.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if you're being called, you know you're being called, you feel that in some way, and you may not be able to put it into words, but you do feel it. Something as I'm listening to you that I'd love to just briefly touch on is the importance of having courage. And I define courage as, not being absent of fear, right? It's more just your ability to have an awareness of that and to be able to move through it, and move past it and continue on your journey. It's common for people that are feeling called to do more I call it getting stuck in a state of becoming, and I think I've heard you mention before, being aware of making yourself into a project, right? It's like when you're feeling called to do something big, it can really be easy to fall into that space of there's always something else that has to happen first. But a lot of times, additional clarity actually comes through action.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when I first left my job and decided to run my business. There was an element of just having to take the leap and trusting that that would catch me. I was pulling oracle cards every day. Should I start a business? Is it appropriate in my highest good? Yeah. And I would get mixed messages. And of course I get messages I didn't want to hear. And I'm like, oh, it's the cards. And I'd reshuffle. And I mean, it's so silly to look back on now, like silly in a funny way, right? I'm just kind of laughing at myself. But anyways, and then I was leaving a lot of money on the table because I wasn't going to networking events, because I was worried what people would think of me. And I was particularly worried about what my former colleagues, like other detectives and other investigators that I had worked with, would say about me, that I was into this woo-woo stuff. But the truth is, and I of course found this out after the fact from them, when they found out what I did, or when they would run into me in the grocery store, they're like, yeah, we're not surprised. You were always speaking like this. I didn't even know how much they knew I was intuitive, because of course I would just, as if any of you are intuitive, you just say things and you don't know you're saying things that other people don't know. But none of that. So then I had to say, okay, well, am I friends with any of them? No, they don't come over to my house. I don't have their phone number. We don't go out socially. I don't know the names of their children, a lot of them, right? We haven't been in touch since I left. So why do I care what they think? If they think I'm a crackpot because I'm running an intuitive business, well, I guess they can think that, because my loyalty now needs to be to my business, not to the opinions of people that were acquaintances that I'm no longer in touch with. And the same is true for now, right? Like if you're really guided to say something or do something that might be polarizing, but the pull to do it, and Jen, you know this because you see me do this on social media probably about once a week or once every 2 weeks or so. I don't even do it that much, but when I do, everyone can feel it. It's like a lightning bolt thuds on my social media timeline, and people go, oh, boom, Jennifer just dropped one. And whatever it is that will come out of me, of course, will come out of me. But my space isn't for that, but I have to have courage for that. And yet, in a lot of ways, I don't feel like I do. And here's why. Because I know people's opinions are like underwear, right? They change them all the time. Hopefully you're changing your underwear all the time. And hopefully. Depending on what the mood people are in, or the projections they're having and stuff like that, will change whether they think I'm great or whether they think I'm a big weenie. And so I can't be loyal to other people's opinions. I have to be loyal to my purpose. I have to be loyal to my business versus my comfort zone. I have to be willing to speak the truth with conviction. Most importantly, I want to live a life, like when I look back on this time, I want to be proud of how I showed up.
Yeah.
I want to be proud of how I showed up for me. I want to be proud of how I showed up for others, how I showed up for my family. And so in that, I have to be clear on my values and my principles. So I'm living a very principled life right now. And in that, integrity is a big piece. And so when I see things that are out of integrity, I have to. It's a compelling thing. It's also part of my human design. Like I just have to call it out. It doesn't mean I'm righteous or I think I'm better. I just sometimes I'll get this wave of things. But because I live a principled life, I just do what feels right. I don't even do what feels courageous. I do what I'm guided to and I do what feels right. And some people might look at me and say that must take a lot of courage. But because years ago, 17 years ago now, really longer than that, but let's say 17 years, I had to make the decision that I didn't care what my colleagues thought of me. And that has been a huge gift in my business. It's been a very profitable gift in my business because I don't care what people think. It doesn't mean I don't care about people. Of course I do. It doesn't mean that people's opinions don't matter. Of course they do. They just can never matter more than my own truth, my own values, my own principles. And so when I can release attachment to what other people think of me, I can go out and show up the way I've been showing up, knowing that there's going to be some people that get their feathers ruffled, but they're probably people that get their feathers ruffled wherever they go. More importantly, the amount of new, incredible, aligned soul family that has come into my field as a result of really speaking my truth. I was speaking my truth before, as you know, Jen, but this last 16 months, I'm just holding the line basically, right? Like this is how it is. If you feel aligned, great. If you don't, that's okay too. Here's who I'm doing business with. Here's what you can expect when you enter my storefront. This is the kind of energy we have here. This is our belief system. We welcome all belief systems if they are not harmful to other people, of course, on and on and on. And it's been interesting, right? Because we're not just dealing with this global event, we'll call it. I know it's more than an event, but for lack of a better word, because I think we're sick of hearing unprecedented. That was like one of the most overused words of 2020. But none of us know how to live during this time, and it certainly hasn't been easy. And I've definitely gotten way more clear on my values. I was pretty clear, but I've definitely got to see like what values am I actually willing to die for? Because they tell you that, by the way, when you do values exercises, right? What values are you willing to die for? But I had never really been presented with situations in my life where I really knew what that meant until March 2020, when I knew damn well that you don't lock up an entire world of healthy people and have people test for something that is so hard to detect that you have to go to get a test to even know if you have it. I knew from the moment that this happened that, yes, I know people have gotten sick from this bacteria. I know that has happened. I know there's treatments for it. I know those treatments are being withheld, not unlike what was happening in the AIDS epidemic when the same doctor, because I don't even know if he is a doctor, actually, I truly don't know if that's a backstory, if he's actually trained as a medical professional, was also withholding AIDS medication from people at that time. And they know it, and they were meeting. Back then, they didn't have social media. They had pamphlets, and they met in these clandestine places to talk about how they were going to get this fraud to release very simple medication that actually would have saved their lives from something that actually was easily treatable had they just been given medication properly, right? But there was no money in that. And of course, there's all kinds of things with that. My point for sharing this is that I knew that that I had to speak up, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. And because I knew the world was always corrupt, but I could kind of exist in my little bubble, right? It wasn't until, it's a good thing in some ways. Like I get that it's a lot of things. It's a lot of poopy things, but it's also a lot of good things, because But for me being locked up, I still would have just been going about my life, knowing that there were these shady people that were running the world and creating all kinds of things. But my physical restriction, or my physical movement, was restricted. And then I was forced to really unpack a lot of that other stuff that I in part didn't want to look at. And I think that's the courageous piece, is the deprogramming from the system, the deprogramming from the matrix. That's a painful process. The despair, the hopelessness, the
Yeah.
crazy making, the gaslighting, all of the various things that you have to go through. You can't go around it. The only way through is through, right? But you will get to the other side. That's how you find your people. But the courage comes from leaning into the deprogramming, which is like ripping a Band-Aid off of a really gaping wound that needs more than just a Band-Aid, right? It's rough, and it's rough for a little bit of time. And then somehow resilience kicks in and conviction kicks in. It kind of pulls you through it. You also find other people magically that are speaking your language. And then you have allies that keep your sanity in check. You have allies that let you know you're not going crazy, that speak your language, that are still moving things forward while they're processing their stuff. That's what I think takes courage, is still living your life instead of existing, and putting yourself out there and creating little acts of rebellion.
Yeah.
While you're leading yourself and while you're leading your communities. And I know
So
I got a little
well,
political there.
yeah, so well put. I mean, there's so much I would love to spend days unpacking from what you just said. I feel like, um, a lot of what's happened over this last year and a half has become glaringly obvious, right? That, the information that is being put out there, that there's an agenda behind, what it is, whether it's stopping people from living their lives or money or whatever it is, there's an alternate agenda. I feel like beyond courage, which is what we were touching on, that tapping into your own intuitive abilities is more important than ever, because in the patriarchal, that system, that indoctrination that we've been living within for so long, we're taught to always follow directions without question. We're taught to always do what we're told and to look outside of ourselves for the solution, when we know we all have that within us. It's just awake to different extents in different people. It's so important now more than ever, I feel like, to know what truth feels like to you and to have a willingness to trust that.
The beauty about truth is it has a frequency.
Yeah.
When you're hearing truth, it will reverberate through your body in a certain way when you're feeling truth. And additionally, when you're feeling a lie, right? A lie has a certain frequency as well. So we don't need to defend the truth. The truth can defend itself because it's truth. It stands up, right? It's a matter of whether people want to hear it. We just need to share the truth, and we need to be smart about how we share the truth, because we still want to have our platforms. But even with the intuition, what I've noticed, because I teach the Akashic Records, as you know, and it's kind of shocking to me how some of the decisions people have made, because I can tell they didn't consult their records. And additionally, what I've noticed, and this was even before all of this nonsense that's going on in the world, just day-to-day stuff, people ask the questions of their intuition or of their guides or of their record keepers that allow them to stay in their comfort zone. And there's a lot of people that are so uncomfortable right now with the restriction that they're not willing to lean in further and lean more into the discomfort and say, okay, but what's the real reason why I'm feeling uncomfortable? If I ask these questions and these questions force me to change my perspective, change my relationships, change the way I show up in the world, am I willing to ask them? Because my desire for truth is greater than my desire to be comfortable. And that's what I'm seeing is happening a lot for people right now.
That's such a That's a, what's the word, tweetable quote, or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Like, what did you say? You said, what's more important, right? You know, them having the truth or being comfortable. That's so true. And also what you said about asking questions that keep themselves in the comfort zone is key. So much truth here, because yeah, you can ask the question and you'll get the answer, but you have to ask the right questions. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, because you have such an extensive background and so much experience in helping people release, you know, deeper traumas that exist. And a lot of people that listen to this podcast are focused on their growth, right? And moving forward. So for someone who is focused on their path, and it feels like, you know, they're doing all the things, right? But they're still challenged, you know, what would be some signs that they might be experiencing that would indicate that they need to reach out for support?
Well, anywhere that we're having any addictive / controlling things. Now, I don't mean that we're addicts or that we're control freaks. What I mean by that is where we're maybe spending a little too much time scrolling on social media because we're being consumers versus creators, right? It's becoming a way to disassociate, to leave our bodies, right? Disconnect from our heart, disconnect from our truth, disconnect from our source. Yeah. And additionally, anywhere where we're seeking more control because we're feeling a lack of control. So maybe we're getting extra just anal about like a junk drawer that's messy. Well, your junk drawer is going to be messy, but maybe you live with other people and you're just losing your marbles because the junk drawer is messy, or that's supposed to go in the junk drawer. That, you know, like I'm giving little examples, but those can be examples. You know, definitely when we up level, we call in more money, that can create a trauma response in the body because we tend to not know how to receive. And so it can activate our nervous system in such a way that we actually create a trauma response. And that's why we can't hold it, right? We end up kind of treating it like a hot potato. We contract and we avoid, right? So some people are avoidant by nature. And so they just kind of check out of the world. They go into the bubble, they'll do it themselves. They retreat, they tend to disengage, not talk to a lot of people. Definitely disruption in sleep, disruption in eating habits. So either someone's gaining weight or losing weight, or maybe just not nourishing themselves a certain way. It's the simple things, but it's the stuff that matters, right? Where they're maybe eating a lot of beiges because they don't have enough color in their life, because their trauma has them disassociated, right, from the color and the vibrancy of their life. And so they maybe will eat more beige things, right? And they maybe shame themselves. Oh, I should be having more greens and more orange and more whatever on my plate, but I have just a lot of beiges. And it's same could be with clothing choices, where you're just wearing things that are more neutral, I'll say, rather than colorful. And I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, there's so many examples. But anytime we're going into a shame, blame, judgment game, that's a pretty good indication that there's some trauma running the show. And then additionally, anywhere, and people who enmesh won't know this, but anywhere that you're trying to enmesh or become codependent and try to entangle with other people, or when you're too fixated on what other people are doing. So you want something in your life, but you keep talking about what someone else isn't doing in their life, and you're extra fixating on what people are doing or aren't doing that's bothering you, or that you want to have control over, when really you just need to be focusing on yourself. That can be a good example. You know, like I said, with the compound trauma, you're going to find yourself overreacting to things that even in your own head, you know, are pretty simple, but it truly is that it's the straw that broke the camel's back. There's too many trauma bricks on your back, right? And we have to let some of those go. So if you're finding that you're getting highly irritated or blowing up or whatever over things that seemingly don't matter, and you kind of know it in your head intellectually, that can be a good indication as well.
Thank you for that. I know that there are a lot of people that will gain value from what you just shared. In closing, Jennifer, is there anything else that you're feeling guided to bring forward?
I would definitely encourage people to deal with the trauma, because the thing is right now we're dealing with global narcissists, right? We're dealing with global sociopaths that have no problem gaslighting and executing various narcissistic patterns. And I can say this for anyone that doesn't know, like, I worked in forensic investigation. I know a lot about human behavior. I'm very trained, right? I have actual qualifications to talk about this. And I know a lot of people will throw around narcissism very loosely. It becomes like this buzzword, right? But people really don't know what it is. Like, I've dealt with a lot of sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, borderline personality disorder, etc. And so even though the people that are running the world right now are more than global narcissists, there's a global narc template essentially being spell cast upon the masses. And the reason I bring this up is because we usually have experience at a young age or our formative years with someone that has narcissistic tendencies. Not everyone. I didn't even know my mom was a narcissist until a few years ago. I had a very push-pull relationship with her. I had to be estranged from her for a few years. I'm not sharing that for attention. I'm sharing that because that's how insidious it can be. And so when we have narcissism projected onto us, we, especially when it comes to business, we will push and pull with client attraction. We want more clients. So right now we might be feeling compelled to be on a mission. I've got to just go out and serve as many people as I can. But the but will be the push and pull, because some part of our unconscious will be expecting that narcissist to come into our business, right? We're unknowingly expecting the world to be just like our mom or just like our dad or just like whoever might have been narcissistic or abusive or manipulative or, bipolar or any of these things where we had to be hyper vigilant. We didn't know how to behave. Who do I need to be for this person, right? And so when we're letting clients in, we're like, who do I need to be? I've got new people coming into my world. What's going to happen? Am I going to be enough for them? What if they want too much from me? What if I lose myself in them? What if they have poor boundaries? What if? But it can be an instant trauma response to something that hasn't even happened. Just the thought of inviting in more clients, right? It's an idea. It's not even a thing yet. We can be responding to that thing as though it's already happening. It creates a trauma response in the body. And then we don't go out and attract clients, or we secretly are relieved when only 2 people join our group program when we know there should be 30 in there, because the trauma is running the show. So the more we can heal our trauma, we're going to have more results in business, and our business is a vehicle to express our purpose. We can reach more people. Of course, we can have more bandwidth and more emotional availability for the actual traumatic things that are happening in humanity right now, so that we can rise up. The whole point of what I'm trying to say here is we've got to clear this stuff so we can rise up and really lead through these times, so that we can lead those who are choosing to stay here to the 5D timeline and beyond, to be creating this new earth together. We're not going to be doing this rooted in old energies, old psychologies, old systems.
Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. Our mission is so much bigger than us. And we forget, right, that we're having this human experience right now, on the planet. And we have this mission, but we have a soul, right? We're having the experience, not the other way around. And it so easily happens that we can get tangled up in what we're experiencing here. It's almost like it can be suction cup to our face sometimes. That's how I think of it anyways. Jennifer.
I'm a big fan of cupping.
Yeah. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom today, and for coming back again. I deeply appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a huge pleasure, and it's always a joy to serve in this way.
Thank you for listening to the Awaken on Purpose podcast. Please visit me and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or at awakenonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can achieve a fulfilled life, live your purpose, and make an impact as a mission-driven leader, visit me at jenniferspore.com. And while you're there, be sure to join Awaken on Purpose, the community, to connect, collaborate, and grow in business and life with others who are like-minded.